My name is Bryan Johnson. I'm a millennial, and my dream for the future is that young Black men in the nonprofit space has the chance to engage in quality mentorship and guidance from those that come before us.
Hello, my name is Tim Russell, and I'm Gen X. And my dream for the future is that my generation understand that the millennial generation has a lot to offer and that we can learn from them as well. So Bryan, I understand you're from Baton Rouge. So what's it like growing up in Baton Rouge? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. If you know Louisiana, you kind of know we have parishes. So to get a little deeper, from Baker, Louisiana, grew up a single mom with three other siblings around me, and I got the chance to see a lot of poverty, a lot of discrimination, a lot of, for some, opportunities. And that's been kind of my biggest driver. I'm here in Chicago now, but I had the chance to kind of live some of the same experiences of before. And I think these last couple of years have highlighted those same efforts that I tried to escape in some situations too. If I'm correct, you're from Chicago too, right?
Actually, no, I'm from Oberlin, Ohio. So yeah, born and raised in Oberlin, grew up, then ended up going to college at Oberlin College. And what I like to say is that there's three interesting facts about Oberlin. The first school to admit African Americans co-educationally with white men. That was 1833. So that's 30 years before the Civil War. Second, the first to graduate an African American woman in 1865, and that was Mary Jane Patterson. And then the third piece, for those people who are football fans, Oberlin College was the last college in the state of Ohio to beat Ohio State in a football game. And the coach was John Heisman. But growing up I love those little facts, but growing up in Oberlin was great. I mean, my father died when I was 15. So in a sense, I grew up with my mom, two brothers, and then just felt, there was always a sense of community. And so in all the work that I do, I believe in just community. I believe in relationships. And I believe that, as Black men, we need to continue to build on those, on relationships and communities.
It's been interesting trying to build community, moving to a new place. So I came from Baton Rouge to Chicago about 2012, and part of this journey has been finding those who are in the same nonprofit space, in the same social sector kind of space to build community. That's proven to be the hardest part. Just curious, moving from Ohio and how's it been kind of building that community for your generation in a way?
Yeah, so I was fortunate when I moved here. I have a sister who's no longer here, but she lived in Chicago. So I had a built-in family. Then I came here for grad school, and that also allowed me to build community. And then I had a good friend, my roommate from college, was here in Chicago as well. So I, had that opportunity to build relationships, and then as well had an opportunity to have, a great internship at the Paternal Involvement Project and Chicago Jobs Council, in which I had the opportunity to every day go in and work with Black men that really kind of took me under their wing and, allowed me to grow and to learn Chicago, so, and then by being with them, that inspired me to do what I do now and what I've done throughout my career of community engagement, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And, thinking of you, Bryan, with your career and Young in It, what's inspired you to do what you do?
Yeah, so my background's in social work. My initial goal was to be a clinician working with youth throughout my city that I lived in. Somehow along the way, I ended up in nonprofit management, and I think I see my own personal mission now is to create and build the resources that can allow organizations like my own organization, Metropolitan Family Services, to continue to reach youth to continue to reach those who are in need of services. That's been my driver. So it's kind of finding that mission of kind of wanting to create some social good and be able to watch my own impact clock kind of grow and do something, to that effect.
Well, that's great. And I think about, my career and, growing is that I moved here in '93 to Chicago and got a master's of theological studies from Garrett. And one of the things, and I knew right away that I did not want to be a professor, or a minister. But I was really, interested in how, theology connected to community. Growing up in the Black church, it was always community around family. And so really wanting to take those lessons. So throughout my career, it's always been focused on that. And fortunately now at WTTW, I have the opportunity to engage with communities, but also to be able to help share the stories of, the Chicago's diverse communities through our community engagement efforts. So it's been just a joy and a thrill to be able to do this in my work.
It's been interesting, at least for my almost 10 years in Chicago, about how diverse Chicago is and how segregated Chicago is in some spaces too. My organization has a chance to kind of touch almost every community area in Chicago plus the suburbs. And I'm always surprised by how different each community is, and as well as the resources, but also those unique kind of characteristics of a community around. Speaking of kind of characteristics in there, it made me think about how you coming up in the 90s around, growing in your career and doing things, and how it's a little different somewhat now, that there are these kind of globally misconceptions about our generation in some spaces. I was just having a conversation with someone about those kind of like misconceptions that we were kind of hit with and stereotypes of our generation. I'm curious if there's something that lives for yours. I know mine is pretty much well known. I can talk about that too, but I'm curious.
Yeah, so, so as I mentioned, I'm Gen X. And so I think, some of the stereotypes is that, we don't, we're not about the niceties, and that, but, when I think about my generation, we are, but we grew up basically leaving school, and then basically the latchkey kid. That was my generation. So you went to school, you came home, and you handled your business, and you knew what you could and you could not do. And so I think one of the misconceptions is that, we don't like the niceties. We don't like structure, but, in a sense, I think that we do, in a sense, crave that structure, because throughout our childhood, we really didn't, we didn't have much of it because of, the generation. So I would say that is probably one of the misconceptions. I love structure. My kids will always say, you got a rule, you got a process for everything. And I'm like, that's how you don't lose things. And that's how you remember where things are at, and you can get things done in an orderly fashion. When you think about yourself, Bryan, one of the things that is interesting, you talked about coming to Chicago, creating this community. How did you go about creating community, being from Baton Rouge and coming to Chicago?
It's been the hardest thing. I think knowing where I went to for grad school, University of Chicago, School of Social Service Administration, that building community around, it's rather tough and hard when you're not from Chicago in some spaces. So it's been kind of working in different group circles, finding someone that has the same interests, finding someone that has the same vision and values, which has been the thing I've wrestled with the most this last year. And saying, hey, come to my circle. Let's talk a little bit. Let's build up this salon a little bit, our affinity group for us. So it's ever growing and ever learning for me about it. But I think I've come to find out most recently, there's a lot of Louisiana folks in Chicago, which has been kind of a good thing to know, that I can mention one of our most famous streets around us and someone's like, I know that. So it's been interesting kind of building that network here.
No, I mean, I agree. I mean, I have met several people and great people from Louisiana, from the Louisiana area, and it's been great people. And then, and everyone that I've met that's been from Louisiana, have all been Black men. And, one of the questions that, as a Black man, a millennial Black male, how do you see being Black and being a Black man? How does that impact what you do? I mean, how do you approach your work? How do you approach probably being one of few in different settings? How do you address that? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think this last year has been the most I've been kind of identifying in that space and like having to wear the badge of it. I think the trauma, the community trauma of the experience that we've seen the last year has highlighted that my voice is unique. It's one that speaks volume and has value to it. And I've had to wear that Black man experience badge in different circles and be able to say, listen, my lived experience is similar to that of many other Black men. And as I enter in conversations, I come to the table as that. I'm a Black man, a father of a Black girl. And for me in the nonprofit space, in the space where there's so limited resources that are around and so few to even make its way to community, that how do we create the space for us and at the table, but also ensuring that communities that are in most need are around. It's one that I'm learning it, to be honest with you. I'm learning how to use my voice, the voice of a Black man in this seat to be able to leverage it and use it for good. Because it's a ever learning process, to be honest with you.
No, I agree that, it is challenging. I think about, myself, I was fortunate. Like I said, I grew up in Oberlin. So it has this long history of Black people, engaging in society, engaging in schools, all of that. And then when I come to Chicago, one of the things I realized quickly, and being from Oberlin, that it is very segregated. And then when you go to grad school, found myself being the only Black man for the most part in all of my theology classes, which was interesting because it forced early to understand that if I don't speak now, the people in that my classmates won't hear my perspective, won't hear the perspective of Black people that one day they may be leading as pastors or reverends, and then taking that into work. I had a great boss. Her name was Cassandra Pulley at Sarah Lee. And Cassandra, used to always say, no matter what you do, as a Black man, people need to hear from you. They need to hear your perspective because you're really the only one at this table. And if you don't speak up, decisions will be made around marketing, around community engagement, whatever it may be, that will impact those communities without them even really understanding it. So it was an important lesson and something that, I take with me every day as I work, and as a father of a son who's a junior and a daughter who is a first year in high school, is really, stressing to them that your voice is the one thing that you have, that you can control your story, and people need to hear that, so it's very important.
My perspective and voice is valid, and
yes.
I will be heard has been the thing that's been my banner for 2021 into going forward, that I hope to kind of push forward. I started doing a lot of our racial equity work, or starting to lead some of that work inside the organization. With that came a lot of reading and learning and watching and studying, just getting my bearings, to be honest with you. One question I've been confronted with is that we have made, on paper, we've made a lot of progress towards equality. But when you stand back and look at it, and you're forced to look at how these 30 years or 60 years, when you go back to the 60s, do you think we've made progress?
I would say that we've made progress to a degree. Now, I'll say we made progress when you look at diversity, because I think what people often forget is that there's a three-headed or a three-legged stool. There's diversity, there's inclusion, and then there's equity. When I was coming up, it was only diversity and inclusion. But so when you think about diversity, you know, are there more people of color? Are there more Black men? Are there more Black women? Are there more Hispanic, Latino, Latinx at the table? Yes. I mean, well, I should say in the building. Yes. Has there been more efforts to drive inclusion in terms of, you know, yes. You know, the issue though still comes around equity. And I'll say two things real quick. When you look at inclusion, are the diverse people, whether you're a person of color, LGBTQ, a person with a differing ability, are they at the table? Are they able to help make decisions regarding the organization? If the answer is no, then you just have diversity and you don't have inclusion. And then when you look at equity, you know, it's also about, you know, around promotions. Are you seeing the same level of promotions for people who are diverse as those that are not? Are you seeing, you know, equality in pay? Are you seeing, you know, equality in terms of, you know, benefits? You know, are LGBTQ people receiving the same benefits as those that are not? And if the answer is yes, then you're moving toward equality. And, you know, I would say, so we have, but there's, you know, a long way to go, a long way to go in that. And I would say also is that, you know, I've been fortunate that the places I've worked, that has been one of the fundamental principles, you know, whether it's been Sara Lee or PepsiCo, and even now at WTTW, you know, we did a strategic plan, and the foundation of that strategic plan is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And, you know, how do we help to enrich lives, engage communities, and inspire exploration through all of those? So I would say yes, but there's still work to do, to go.
Yeah, I think that in the same frame as we've done our racial equity work to create a more just organization that's equitable for all communities, not just communities of color around, you know, they made me think that millennials get a bad rap in some cases because we're seen as kind of, you know, jumpers in our jobs, moving from place to place. And it made me think that our values are more on the plate, are more for show, right? That if an organization or place that we're at doesn't hold our values, we're likely to leave in some situations. So it's interesting seeing how, from your perspective, how we've grown in the last 60 years, but there's still more work to do. But the individuals that are at the table driving some of those conversations now, the tolerance for it is
yeah, but I will say that, you know, the thing that I do appreciate about millennials, or my generation was told, you know, you go to college, you get a job, you work that job for 40 or 50 years, you get your pension, and then you move on. Okay. And so even when you look at mine, I've had more than one job. You know, but what I love about millennials is the fact that my generation and the generation before, in a sense, preached it, DE&I. But your generation, I feel as though, is actually living it out. And I'll say, and I will just, you know, in the corporate space and in the workspace, is because what you do is that, for the most part, you hold organizations accountable. You say, you know what, when I look for a job or look for employment, I need to see people who look like me. I need to see what your policies are. I need to see who you're engaging with in the community. If that doesn't align, then you know what, you don't deserve for my talents to be there. And once you get there and you realize that that's not the case, you say, you know what, my talents could be better used somewhere else that's more aligned or more closely related to, you know, my belief in diversity, equity, inclusion, and community, whatever that may be. So I really appreciate that from, you know, from millennials.
You capped the sentiment just well. I thought I was talking to a millennial for a second because of that, but no, thank you for the way you said that, because that's truly the sentiment that I have, and a lot of my friends in the same space are having now.
Mm-hmm. And you know, with DE&I, I'm sorry, I could talk about this forever, because I cut my teeth, for lack of a better word, in this space. And the thing about, what I will suggest as well as you're going through this, your DE&I journey with your organization is also, and there's nothing wrong with this, is connecting it back to the business case for the organization, having it be part of the strategic plan. So the business case, at Metropolitan, y'all have complex social issues that you're dealing with humans every day. And the business case is that diverse people, diverse teams are able to help solve for those complex issues. A, B, looking at, who are you serving? Are the people that you're serving being reflected? That's the business case. When you look at going out to get funding, or asking people whether it's individual donors or whatever, is that do people that, if you're approaching a certain community, do you have people that look like that community that is able to go out and, get funding, and so I think those are all key things. And those are things that the corporate world, especially when you look at food and beverage companies, have done well, and that's one of the things that, we're doing on our journey at, WTTW is that, we're taking a hard look at that. What content are we putting on over air? Who is behind the camera? Who's in front of the camera? What are, when we have our community conversations based upon, the documentaries, is it reflective of those communities of Chicago and the region's, demographics? So, those are things that are important. So I would say, it's good for it to be the right thing to do, but also there's nothing wrong with it also being creating the business case for it. And luckily you have a great leader who I know is committed to that journey.
Yeah, I was going to say the same, that I've been fortunate to learn from our leaders here. We've tied our racial equity, DEI work to our strategic plan, at the same time moving it through, that we're able to ensure that the voices of our staff and community, that we're as reflective as those that we serve in the community. And they're able to fight for those things that are just and right on behalf of those that we serve across the board. It's been a pretty big learning journey, but one that we've been committed to moving forward for the next couple of years.
Yeah, it really is. And I think also understanding that everyone comes to the journey at a different place. And so, I think of, like, let's say if you use my generation and the journey, we're right off of the civil rights movement, but then we're right before, in a sense, the Black Lives Matter movement. So we're caught in this middle. And so there's been benefits that we have reaped because of the civil rights movement, being able to move into corporate America, having, there was more scholarships available, so things of that nature for us to go to school and to reap some of those rewards. But then the flip side is that we took that and we played it safe, and then your generation now is confronting us with the fact that, what, you've played it safe. We have to take it a step further, whatever that may mean, and so it's not just a reckoning for America. I would say that the Black Lives Matter DE&I journey is also a reckoning for Black folks of my generation, and the generation before, because we also have to come to terms and grips of those opportunities in which we could have pushed it a little further and we chose not to. And I think that's something that we've learned, at least myself, that I've learned from your generation.
You mentioned a lot about kind of building community, and I think this is honestly one of the first chances I've had to really engage with the Black male that's in this same space. How do we create that more? How do you build that intentional space where young and older Black men can come together to say, this is the experience, this is how we build this, how we grow. Watch out for this hurdle, man. That's my dream, in some ways.
Yeah. No, I mean, that is a great question. I think, when I was when I was younger and coming in through corporate America, there were these built-in opportunities already. I think what we have to do is be very intentional. And I think the pandemic has hurt in the sense that it's forced us to stay more inside, more isolated. But it's about being intentional. It's about reaching out and making those connections. There are people that I have relationships with that still regularly, whether via Zoom or FaceTime, whatever it may be, we still connect. But it is important because often, especially when you think about isolation in the pandemic, is that you can feel a sense of being alone in your place of work, and that's just having someone who can relate to your struggles. So I would say it's just being very intentional about doing that, which I think is probably the most important piece. And from your perspective, I think about millennials and I think about my generation, and there's always that generation who's above who hates to let go, who hates to relinquish the little bit of power we may believe we have or influence. If you could say something to my generation, to me, what would that be in order for us to be like, okay, we can pass the torch, for lack of a better word?
I think one of the things that I welcome the most of is this kind of like be able to learn, be able to listen. I think there's a different, chapter or a different volume that's kind of coming up where the experience is different, and being able to listen and learn and still be able to grow is one thing that I think is present. But for me also, it's like the affinity groups, right? The space that we have a unique kind of bridge that many others don't have, or they have different bridges to have. But learning and listening is that biggest part. And someone mentioned kind of this reverse mentor role. While I also need a mentor in some spaces, right? I think that some of the older generations, there could be that reverse case that's around.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, because I think about, one of the things is that my generation, looking at the generation before, which I believe would have been the boomers, you look at them and be like, these, what do these old cats know? They're walking around in their dusty civil rights suits, but you don't realize that, there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom until you get older. It's almost like with your parents, in a sense, is that, as you get older, you realize those little bit of nuggets that they were, sending to us, that was letting us know what was around the corner, so that we didn't have to have the same struggles, that they had, different struggles, but that, we didn't necessarily repeat some of the struggles or be able to learn from theirs. And I think that's one of the things that, my generation, can definitely do better at, is really sharing some of the struggles, because when we came up, in that early 90s, 2000s, in terms of corporate America and in the work, is that, there were a different set of struggles. There were fewer of us than there of Black men, Black women, people of color in those positions as there are now, but a lot of the issues are the same. And I think being able to share how did we address it and learn together from that, I think is an important, comment that you made.
Even this is the benefit of these conversations, that I came across something from 30 years ago where those same struggles for equality and racial equality were an ever-present fight. With Rodney King is one example, 30 years, and we're still in that same thing. So even just hearing how you, from your experience, what you've learned through that, and how we're still kind of fighting through it is interesting. Something I'd love to learn from. What gets in the way? What stops millennials from being able to make that bridge of conversation?
And what's interesting that you mentioned it is that, I was having a conversation with my son, and he knows Colin Kaepernick took a knee, but not realizing that, in the 80s, there was Mustafa for the NBA who took a stand, who took a knee. Before that, there was Tommy Smith in the Olympics, who didn't necessarily, and Juan Carlos, who raised the Black Power fist. There was the group of 8 African-American men who all came together, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown, Bill Russell, who came together to take a stand. And so you see that through those generations, but what often happens is that generations believe that we were the only ones, or that the way we did it was better than the way the next generation has done it. But it's all this path, this continual link of our fight and our struggle for equality. So I always like to try to draw those connections as well.
I think Tip, I really want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. I think this building connections in community is one of the things I want to carry with me going forward. So I really thank you for grabbing time and talking today.
Oh, you know what? The pleasure was all mine. It's great to get to know you, and looking forward to connecting. And please tell my good buddy Rick I said hello.
Will do.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Take care.
Thank you.